So usually on the outside the thing will be filthy. It'll be covered with dirt, dust. First thing you want to do with the transmitter is remove the covers. The hardware that's used in the transmitter is ARC-5. It's a smaller size than 256. So we're going to take out these 080 screws, and you're going to take the top and the bottom off. You're going to take the covers, the cover over the finals off. Give this thing a good washing. It's a good time to have some soap and water. Wash the things up. Once you get down to the transmitter, get inside, you're going to want to remove the tubes first for safety. Take the tubes out of the set. Give them a good inspection and a good cleaning. Sometimes these end up in the sink as well. Get the tubes all cleaned up. A lot of the dirt and dust on the outside can be taken care of with a little soap and water as well. Before you get to any lubrication or anything to do with wiring, you want to make sure you get all the dirt off the rig. So that's the first thing we need to do. Once we get the bottom cover off, now's the time to give it a critical look over and see if something's missing. The keying relay is intact. Looks like nothing's been modified in the rear of this transmitter. This is the dropping resistor for the filaments on the smaller tubes in the back, the 1629. This is the triple cap. We're going to get into that a little bit later. The triple cap is infamous for getting leaky and causing the transmitter to malfunction. And for the most part, if you have one that is not leaky, you can leave it in. But a lot of people change them out and put 3.05 630 volt capacitors on a terminal strip in place of this triple cap, and it improves mightily the performance of the transmitter. As this capacitor gets leaky, the performance goes down, especially in regard to chirp and instability in the VFO. So this is a pretty clean looking transmitter. This is a BC696. It's in pretty good shape. Don't be afraid to give these things a bath, by the way. You can dunk these things completely under water, dry it off as best you can, and then throw it in the oven at the lowest temperature the oven will go, and bake it out for a half hour. That's a great starting point. Before you do anything with these transmitters, you've got to get them clean, and the first step is to give them a little bath. Remove the triple cap from another command transmitter. This is what it looks like. There are 3 posts and ground, so there are literally 3.05 microfarad capacitors in one envelope. And this is best replaced with 3 Mylar 630 volt capacitors. Can you use ceramic discs? Sure, they'll work okay, but the yellow ceramics, or the yellow Mylars, or the orange drop capacitors are an excellent replacement for these. And in many cases, the capacitors you use will be a little bit larger, but there's plenty of room to put the substitute in. So we've got the unit down to this point. We're going to spray deoxit or contact cleaner in every contact on the tube sockets, and we're going to use a Q-tip to make sure that those sockets are completely clean. Good contact with the tube pins is important for stability in the transmitter. We'll also clean up the plate caps. We're going to go over the roller inductor. A good way to clean up the roller inductor is to use some silver cleaner and a toothbrush. Here's a product called Never Dull. This also can be used as long as you clean up the residue that it leaves behind. Once everything is all cleaned up, we're ready to go into the inner sanctum of the transmitter, which is the VFO compartment. Start by removing the ARC-80 screws that hold the VFO compartment down. It's probably fastest just to break the paint seal on each one. Well, this is the VFO cover. It says, "Warning, do not remove this shield." So that's what we're going to do. We're going to remove the shield. Notice that there is an powdered iron slug that allows you to adjust the coil, and there's a variable capacitor. These two together are what set the band spread on the dial so that it's calibrated. So that's why they don't want you to touch this. Do not remove this shield, and do not change the adjustment of the two screws with the blue heads. So let's take a peek. And notice how everything has paint on it in order to keep it completely sealed, and it shows people that it hasn't been tampered with. So it's not only a Loctite mechanism, it's showing you that this VFO has never been taken apart since the transmitter was built in 1944. So this is the first time this shield's been off since 1944. Now, inside we see a capacitor, a variable capacitor, but it's not that variable because it's been set into one position. There's also a variable capacitor trimmer on top, which allows the fine setting of the dial. And there is a small temperature compensation capacitor. And I have seen several transmitters where these temperature caps have gone bad. So clip that out if your VFO is acting funny. Just clip it right out. We're not operating at 17,000 feet. We're in a decent, nice warm ham shack, and we do not need that temp cap capacitor. If nothing is going bad, however, you can leave it in place. Here is the Hartley oscillator tank coil of the VFO. I don't know if you can see this or not, but you can see it looks a little darker down here. That is a tertiary winding, the tertiary winding that allows the filaments as well as the cathode to ride above ground. So here are the things that can go wrong. Because this thing hasn't moved in 70 years, it's a good idea to move it. And what you want to do is you want to spray it with deoxit on the contacts, and then you're going to want to move both of these capacitors. So the one on top, I simply spray and I move that capacitor. And the first time I moved it, there was a click. That's because that capacitor hadn't been moved in so long it actually oxidized in place. What can happen is these capacitors can form a diode, and putting a diode right in a situation where we're supposed to have a pure capacitor can cause an oscillator to stop completely. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to loosen up this set screw, and we're going to work this capacitor back and forth. That screw was really tight. I had to use a really heavy-duty screwdriver to get that loose. One trick for getting through this paint is to put the tip of your soldering iron on the head of the screw temporarily. That'll soften up the paint, make this operation a little easier. Now that it's loose, as you can see, it will move back and forth slightly. That movement, along with spraying with the deoxit, will allow good electrical contact on the capacitor. The other thing I usually do is there are 3 screws that hold down the oscillator coil itself. I will typically loosen those, spray them with deoxit, and tighten them back up again. If everything looks good from that point on, all I do is put the cover right back on. Notice this is a little bit bent. This is the access cover. We can straighten that out a little bit before we put it back together. But that's it. We're going to put it right back on. We're going to put those screws right back in. And if you want to be complete, you can put some tester's paint on each, and it'll look just like a brand new transmitter. Okay, we have the VFO shield back in place. Now there's another place we need to look. Notice that this is the main VFO capacitor, and this is the main power amplifier capacitor. They are ganged and connected together with a speedometer cable. when you tune, these two capacitors track. There's one more capacitor that we're going to need to adjust. This is the VFO variable capacitor, and this is the power amplifier variable capacitor. These two are ganged together with this dual worm drive. The capacitor here is the set capacitor that allows you to set the power amplifier tuning to be exactly the same as the VFO tuning. So as the transmitter's tuning through its whole range, the VFO and the power amplifier track almost perfectly. But again, here's a capacitor that's been in the same position for many, many years, and there's a good possibility that the connection from the capacitor to its pickup plate here on the bottom has become oxidized. So we're going to need to loosen that capacitor and move it around a little bit. So to do that, we remove these two access plugs. Take these guys out. And then we're going to loosen up the set mechanism. Again, it's covered with this paint, which makes it very difficult to loosen. So I'm going to have to use a heavier screwdriver to get into that screw to loosen it up. And there it goes, it's loose. So now we can move that up and down. It's a little trickier to do that, but we can get in there and lever it back and forth a little bit. There it goes. Okay, so now that's loose. We can spray the contact with deoxit or contact cleaner. And again, you can just tighten that back up, and that capacitor will be ready to go. Contacts on the keying relay need to be touched up. Use a very, very fine grit sandpaper like 600 and spray the contacts with deoxit or contact cleaner. Same goes for the antenna relay. Many people don't use the antenna relay because it clanks and makes too much noise. If you want, you can take the contact and lift it up, as I've done right here. Lift it up and over so that it makes contact permanently with the antenna connector. The wire that goes to this relay could be temporarily disconnected so it's not clanking back and forth as you key. As you key the transmitter normally, the keying relay will be clicking on and off. This can be a little bit problematic and loud, even though it's just one small relay. And I've actually put foam padding underneath the relay to act as a cushion between the relay and the mounting on the side of the transmitter. Now the controls on the front normally will be very rough to turn when you get the transmitter initially. You can loosen them up by spraying with WD-40 as a solvent. WD-40 itself is not a good lubricant for the long term, but it does make a good solvent to get rid of the old grease and dirt. Continue to pour in the WD-40 until everything is turning smoothly. You'll want to hit the roller inductor, especially that worm gear, all the controls and locks on the front. And then you want to use a good quality oil, and on the worm gear you'll want to put a synthetic grease like a clear or a lithium grease, so that this is absolutely smooth, and it's a joy to use once the transmitter is properly lubricated. Now, after we've done the cleanup, we've done the relubrication of everything, now's the time to do a real critical inspection of the transmitter and see if there's any modifications that have been made that you don't understand. Like I said, in most cases there'll be the standard radio amateur handbook conversion, which involved putting the two tubes in parallel so the whole thing could be powered on 12 volts. Usually there's a key jack. This transmitter, which has not been modified, we should be able to fire up and use in stock condition, which would be really nice. We can use the transmitter just the way it was designed, and it should key just fine.